What is up, folks? You're with Budgetmonk, and welcome to showing off one of the, well, I say one of, but the most ambitious thing I have ever done here on EU4 and probably on my channel. My personal best. It is my first one tag, as in a true one tag, as in no colonial nations, as our capital is out in San Francisco. And yes, it does say Imperial India over here on the supercontinent of this region of the world, Eurasia and Africa, because our capital is not there. But I don't know why exactly it chose to say India, but there you go. Not only that, though, guys, this was not a one tag challenge. This was a one culture challenge. And we are the Holy Roman Empire, as you can see, but our primary culture is the lost culture of Rome. Roman culture, and I set out to do this about 3 months ago, and I have completed what was seeming like the undoable. We have plenty of time to spare. I actually have not completed my colonies, as technically they do not need to complete in order to be Roman and eliminate Roman culture from the game. So not only are we the nation that is 100% Roman, but there is no other culture, even uncolonized land, in the entire game. And this was achieved on patch 1.28, and which is extremely difficult, by the way, and with zero save scumming, aka birding or opening and closing the game when something goes wrong to avoid it. I'm extremely proud of myself, regardless of what anybody thinks. This was absolutely insane. It took me, like I said, 3 months. Probably a month dedicated to each session where we started again over and over in order to get a good run going, and then actually abandon the run at the sort of early 1700s as it dawned on me that we were not going to make it. This was my third attempt to convert the entire world to Roman. An extra difficult culture, as it is a lost culture. I'm going to talk a little bit about that on patch 1.28 without save scumming a single time. And there is both the streaming community that I have that can vouch for that, but also 100% of the footage on my backup channel, Budgetmonk Live Archive, so that it can in fact be verified that we did not save scum a single time. If I do say so myself, I could be wrong, but that is basically the most ambitious thing that has ever been achieved in the EU4 community. As anybody else who has actually one cultured, save scums at the drop of a hat. So there we go. Patting myself on the back there. Don't really care, because I know some people are going to think I'm arrogant for saying that, but there it is, boys. Feels good, man. I wanted to talk a little bit about the basics here as we continue this video, and I am going to show you guys the timeline. But to anybody who cannot comprehend how this is even possible, as it can be extremely expensive to culture change provinces, basically you stack modifiers. So, for example, the Enlightenment reduces culture conversion cost by 25%. And the religious ideas reduces it by 25%. But there is also a policy with influence, which reduces it by 20%. By the way, my ideas are very weird. No, we did not take aristocratic or even humanist. We finished that one later on, as we have, as you can see, plenty of points to spare. So the tactic is to actually wait until you have the Enlightenment, which spawns at around the year 1700. And you need to store your points in the meantime. The idea is that you spend your points as you gather them on culture converting provinces, and then you cancel those provinces before they progress past 10% to get 100% refund. And by using that, banking some, canceling, banking, canceling, banking, canceling, you can store points here in the meantime. Now there are some issues. That is the basics to culture converting. Also, the parliamentary government type can give you a debate to reduce the cost by 15%. You can begin the golden era to reduce point cost by 10%. And by accumulating quite some innovativeness, you can reduce point cost also. Those are pretty much the basics. Now, you store the points. However, in patch 1.28, the colonial nations are absolutely terrible with culture. There's all sorts of culture everywhere due to export minority. And they basically reworked them. So rather than in the past, they used to be very sort of culturally supremacist. They would convert all of Mexico and so on to their culture very zealously. Because of all the cultures everywhere and preventing the AI from just ruining that, they're basically programmed to just not care anymore, and they will accept cultures. Meaning, we need our capital in the new world to not form colonial nations. Now, that is part of the reason that Roman culture is so difficult, because forming Rome obviously requires fairs and provinces all over the place. Anatolia, the Balkans, Vienna, Zealand, some in the British Isles, French, all this stuff. So when you form Rome, it moves your capital to Roma. Recently, I believe in this patch as well, they made it extremely borderline impossible to actually move your capital, which is what we need to do. So ordinarily, say that we're playing Portugal, it wouldn't be too challenging to go extremely colonial, and maybe you could make one big compromise, like basically maybe release Granada as a Catholic and hand off your provinces, surround your capital city, and move out towards Brazil, for example, then reintegrate Granada. Not too costly. The problem is, if you did that and then annexed this required form Rome, your capital would flip back to Rome. That is why, one of the reasons why doing the Lost Culture Rome is, if I do say so myself, much more prestigious than other cultures. And cool, if I do say so myself. I am glad that we did that. So those are basically the basics. Now let's talk about how we achieved it. Let's talk about innovativeness here really quickly. Some innovations that we did. I began as the nation of Austria. And you guys know that I personally view Austria as my kind of go-to most powerful nation. I was trying to rack my brains with this current dynamic being so difficult in this patch, how that it was even possible and plausible to do this as Rome. And what did occur to me is the fact that if you form Rome as the emperor, all of your land leaves the empire. And it is intended to be that Rome and the Holy Roman Empire are both the same thing, essentially, and therefore are very incompatible. Well, what that means is you cannot form Rome if you are the Holy Roman Empire, because they kind of acknowledge that that's an OP strategy to rush the HRE dynamic and dominate Europe to form Rome. You can't do that. And because of that kind of incompatibility, they're supposed to ruin the empire, but ironically, it actually benefits the empire. If you have already revoked privilege here, you can actually remove your land whilst you have revoked from the empire by forming Rome. So that is exactly what I did. By removing your capital from the empire, Rome, which is what forming Rome does, you can actually therefore move your capital. Now, like I said, they made it basically impossible to actually move your capital. So what we did is we owned Vienna, obviously. We got the Burgundian inheritance to own Zealand, and we ended up owning all of the required provinces while subjugating the Germans and feeding them into the rest of Europe, not required to form Rome. Upon forming the Roman Empire, my land was outside of the empire, and I was able to hand off all of Europe to our subjects in order to move our capital out to the New World. But the difference is, like I just said with Portugal, of course, hitting that final HRE button, we're able to integrate all of the land that we handed off for free when you annex subjects. And you'll see here when we go through the timeline, I handed off much more than that. But in regards to other innovations, I have a series regarding the Holy Roman Empire. Like, obviously, we can do a pretty good job. I can revoke, my earliest revoke ever was 1513. We could have bet that in this game, by the way. I chose to actually prolong and go later for more power. But the reason we could beat that is because of innovations. Like, this is a must-do, in my opinion. We improved even more. Rather than petitioning Poland like we did in the past, what I was able to do is use the age bonus and the age of discovery to make claims off of claims and get a claim on Krakow. Now, you could do it without claims. It's going to increase the aggressive expansion cost and actually cost you a significant amount of Diplo points. The idea is to actually go in against Poland. We took the traditional route of PUing Bohemia, and the main reason was because we were going to be more aggressive, meaning I wanted his vote and I wanted his soldiers to help us, but that was a little bit of a time sink PUing Bohemia, because ordinarily we revoke Privilegia so quickly that he actually becomes my subject in about 50 years anyway, and I'm not too worried about actually PUing him. But I did because of the third reason, that it actually allows me to core up Krakow. Now, the idea is to take Krakow from Poland before they move their capital, aka 10 years before they integrate Mirzovia and get the decision to move the capital to Warsaw. You do that, and you core this up and add it to the empire as it is adjacent to the empire. Upon doing that, you actually return it to him. Now, many people understand the strategy of cheesing nations into the empire by taking their capital, adding it to the empire, returning the capital back to them, then taking their new capital, which will return their capital to their old capital, and they will now become a member of the empire. Well, this is exactly what we did with Poland, except we did it very early in the game. And the tactic we did is we now had imperial ban upon returning Krakow, and you're able to freely release Mirzovia, which will then, because regardless of where Poland places his capital, once he integrates Mirzovia, he will move it to Warsaw. So you're then, once your truce is up, able to use Imperial Ban, release Mirzovia, which moves his capital back to his most prestigious province, Krakow, which is now inside of the Empire. But by doing this, and also having him become an invalid rival, because he'll probably hate you, or alternatively, very carefully managing relations, he will now be an independent Poland here, and have reconquest, because this is Polish provinces, most likely having a lot of this clay as well, and he will actually add all of this to the empire for free, and ultimately this and this as well as he integrates it. A huge innovation here. I actually did the same thing against Denmark by using the tactic of imperial ban on Holstein, but taking Holstein for myself rather than liberating them, claiming up his capital. And we were able to actually get these nations, and Lithuania, by the way, as well, inside of the empire and have them add their provinces, resulting in a ridiculously early revoke privilegia. So those were the two big tactics: innovating upon the empire and allowing this one culture to become plausible and possible by feeding everything to the empire, moving our capital. But there was a huge downside, and that is that at this stage, after forming Rome, all this work, we were extremely powerful by transferring trade from our subjects, collecting in Venice, Genoa, and the English Channel, because global trade gives you an additional merchant. With our 3 merchants, extremely powerful. Force limit from our subjects, compounding the empire bonuses, as well as the subjects' increased force limit from influence, which is required to get the policy. The increased subsidies from our subjects, 25%, extremely affluent, even though we just had Rome and our colonial area. But the issue was that I owned no areas of our religion without separatism to bank points in. So we didn't begin the true Diplo bank until very late in the game, about 1650. And it was an extremely difficult run. I had banked a lot of points up until that stage, and I chose the most optimal thing to do with them would to be to just convert provinces inefficiently, aka without the modifiers. So we chose at that point to dump our Diplo points, converting provinces before handing them off. And we did have a significant amount of Roman around the world, throughout Greece, Turkey, the British Isles, all of our own territory, obviously, which was Austrian, became Roman, and throughout the Balkans. We had a large amount of Roman, and at least it was going to provide adjacent bonuses, 25% reduction to a vast amount of clay around the world. So we're going to do the time lapse here, but I want to show you guys one other concept to make people understand. If you typically take religious ideas, which is quite a popular one, right, and you have reduced culture conversion by 25%, you're going to take this for granted. So keep this in mind. What do I mean by that? Let's say that a province costs 250 Diplo points to convert. Well, many people might not realize, but a province costs 10 Diplo points per development, meaning that a trash territory that costs 3 div is going to cost 30 Diplo points. And a 30 plus, it caps out at 30, development province is going to cost 300. It's 10 times per the development. Now, if you have the 25% reduction, that 300 is going to be what? 225, right? 25% reduced. It's going to cost 225. So your maximum cost is going to be 225 in your change culture list. Now, you're going to take that for granted. What do I mean by that? If you get another modifier, like the Enlightenment, many people will think that reduced cost by 25%, you're going to do 225 reduced by 25%, but that's not the case. The case is that instead of being 300 reduced by 25%, it's going to be 300 reduced by both modifiers, aka 50%. So it's going to take another 75 off and take it down to 150 cost. So these reduction in culture conversion costs, they compound in an incredible manner. Another 45% from the parliament and from the policy here. Do you see what I'm saying? They compound massively because that's going to be 45% plus this. Wait, is that correct? 35%, excuse me, plus this, plus the Enlightenment. So it's actually 50%, and with all our modifiers resulting in 85% reduction. So you're paying a grand total of 15%. Now, just to clarify, the capacity is 90%. So many people are under the impression, for example, that Karaman is the best because they have a big cultural conversion reduction bonus. I think it's 25%. In reality, any nation, I think Corfu also has 5%. Well, actually, if you stack the modifiers, Corfu's 5% and Karaman's 25%, assuming those numbers are correctly, forgive me if I'm wrong, are the equivalent of each other. The only advantage to playing Karaman are other ideas, the fact that they're more powerful, etc. But I mean, in regards to culture conversion cost, is the fact that you could avoid forming a parliament if you wanted to, if that benefited you. Those are the only benefits. It caps out at 90%. So rather than playing a nation that has cultural conversion reduction cost, I chose to just play the biggest and best powerhouse, at least for myself, Austria, in order to form Rome, and just do away with the 5% additional modifier that we could get if we played another nation. So I just wanted to clarify that. And one other thing, the 25% reduced cost for converting a province adjacent. So if you convert Anconia when Abruzzi is Roman, you'll get a 25% reduction. It does not compound in the same way. So it's not going to go over 100%. You're going to get the massively cheapened version of the cost, and then that little number will be adjusted by 25%. It's still very significant, but don't be under the impression that you can go over the cap of 90%. It's going to do the number basically reduced by 90%, and then that number reduced by 25%. Now, the same thing is applicable to the overseas regions, which are designated regions like trade company regions where things didn't exist from the beginning of the game, will have 80% reduced cost, which again does not compound in the same way, but you will take that final result and reduce it by 80%, just to make that clear. And we were able to convert many provinces throughout the world, including all of Siberia, most of Siberia, the 3 dev ones, for 0 cost. So even though they don't compound, they were rounded down. They were less than 1 and rounded down to 0 cost. Absolutely mind-blowing to me. personally. Now, I believe that's it. Let's go through the timeline here, guys, and I'm going to talk about some of the shrewd tactics that we did if you guys are still with me after all this time. Of course, playing as Austria, and we'll go up to about speed 3 as we show off. We did get the big gun inheritance pretty early in the game, absolutely amazing, and that's basically why we had an extremely rough early game trying to achieve everything I wanted to achieve, but I stuck with it vigilantly the whole time. I didn't want to throw away the big gun inheritance, so I did do a shrewd tactic. I think it was an OCB of actually releasing Byzantium, treading on the Ottomans early, and trying to cheese people inside of the empire. You can see the Polish tactic I was talking about. Now keep in mind that I'm bridging out coring and spreading the empire range out towards Novgorod. This was one of the most impactful things that I did throughout the entire game, was annex what remained of Novgorod, release them as a vassal, reconquest all of Novgorod into Muscovy. Look at us, man. 1503, all over the place here, boys. Now, we did end up losing wars, by the way. I just want to make that clear. We did end up losing to coalitions because we were just in over our head doing absolute mad stuff the entire time. The tactic that I would do against coalitions is I would try to release land that became individual princes inside of the empire, and therefore actually benefiting me. We released Luxembourg the same way, and I think Bar for the imperial authority, although bailing me out of the war. In regards to Novgorod, guys, we actually were trying to gauge, because I cored this stuff up, I bridged it out there, Danzig, here, Denmark's now inside the empire and added his land, but I owned this previously. We cored these up and spread the empire out here, so Novgorod is a member of the empire as well as being my vassal. I was keeping an eye out for an elector being eliminated. I just want that to be clear. So that at one stage, the plan with Novgorod was to reconquest him and to actually make him become an elector, which worked out perfectly, by the way. Then I would release Novgorod. This was one of the other tactics, as well as adding Denmark and Poland to the empire, which added its land, was then to release Novgorod as a prince. He becomes self-autonomous, and he added everything within Russia to the empire. That was a shrewd little tactic there for a lot of imperial. There it is. And around early, like I said, 1513, he's independent, getting all the imperial authority. Now the plan is, after allying him and helping him against Muscovy, feeding him as much as possible, we actually make him become an elector when a slot is freed up, so that if and when he forms Russia, he does not leave the empire. But as I'm on speed 3 here, as time goes on, you can see I'm spreading further and further out towards Asia. Let me just say that we have actually cheesed the Europeans inside of the Holy Roman Empire post-revoke. And what I was doing is losing wars to revoke, to offer tribute by reducing the revoke privileger, removing a reform, and then I would have worked on the capitals of Paris, etc., gotten them inside the empire, and then revoked privilegia again to basically annex them. So we encountered bugs in my previous runs, by the way, guys, where Aragon, if you PU Spain, Aragon... Oh, that's not true, by the way. I got Britain in France, but with Spain, we actually fed the subject of Naples, who was inside the empire, and fed the subject of Aragon, who was inside the empire. And then we had the empire spread nearer to his capital region. Then we cheesed him inside the empire. He actually annexed all of Portugal except for Lisbon. But the approach that I was taking is to pretend I was PUing these nations and integrate them through diplomacy. And it worked quite well. We experienced a patch bug. By the way, Russian Novgorod up here, who is now using the Siberian frontier to colonize all of this as Catholic. The major significant thing about that tactic is that he is Catholic. So we crushed the Protestant Reformation, which was isolated in Germany, and all of Europe, the colonies, everything is actually Catholic. Feels good, man. I was going to say that in one of my other runs where we abandoned it, we got the Habsburg event with Spain, PU'd him when he had Aragon and Naples as independent personal unions, which is the ideal circumstance because as Austria, you have a good likelihood to actually inherit them. Because that's relatively small and your reputation is very high. However, when we PU'd him, there is actually a bug where your ruler becomes... See, I just cheesed Spain inside the empire at that moment. These are all now members of the empire, which we actually diplomatically integrating using the Austrian reduced diplo annexation cost and the influence reduced diplo annexation cost, and also I believe a policy, if I remember correctly, but massively reduced diplo annexation cost, integrating those guys into the empire, whilst we use Dave's Volt CB all over the world, spreading and coring up as much as we possibly can, having the vast majority of provinces here required to form Rome already, just needing to integrate these nations. When you PU Spain in this patch, guys, you don't get Aragon. It bugs out. It duplicates your ruler, and it says you get a personal union, but he's actually independent. I do want to say one other little cheeky tip, guys. You don't actually need to core the provinces to form Rome. 1632, boys. Wow. So that went really quick. The timeline didn't even see it. So what you can do with Rome, guys, is you can actually annex Rome and form Rome, and it will actually give you the core on Rome, which is pretty impressive because the development is very high. It moves your capital to an uncored province and cores it up for you. Pretty cool. Now, it won't core up other provinces, but just to be clear, you can form Rome without coring the provinces. So, for example, if I had to annex Portugal, you could fully annex them. You could even overextend, form Rome, and it will form regardless of this. You require to own it, but not core it. And then in this case, as you can see, the game was paused. We form Rome. I released Croatia, and we fed all of Europe to the empire. So in that case, you could feed your overextension to them. That's what I'm saying. That's something we took advantage of. Do you see what I'm saying? And have them core it up. But there we go. It was about 1650. We formed Rome, keeping the holy cities for myself. At this stage, keeping other dev for myself for CBs. You can see Circassian Africa. He's inside the empire. Dithmarsh and Maghreb. Another issue in this patch is corruption, having too many territories. So my focus was giving trading company regions. I'm happy to hold trading company regions. At this stage, I needed to get rid of all territories to move my capital to the New World. But I'm going to annex trading company regions for myself, because when you add them to a trading company, they don't have too many territories modified. They don't count as a territory. But I was trying to give every region to the Holy Roman Empire, making colonies everywhere. Avaria is a member of the empire as well. And you can see our influence over the New World here, moving my capital. So this amount of development that we had was more on the North American continent than what is owned here by myself, keeping company charters for CBs, as it's long before imperialism and we were using the Deus Vult CB. So the rest is history, boys. Just constant warfare all around the world. Unfortunately, there was a moment, which wasn't apparent here by the timeline, of the Roman Empire, which in its full glory, but unfortunately we never saw the blurple annexing the entire world, because of course the way to get rid of these members of the Holy Roman Empire, Aristochan, all members, Russia, was to hit the HRE button to unify them. But it was a long road, it was brutal, and you can see how quickly, this is Spain, Great Britain, it was around there, around 1736, that we actually annexed the whole world in terms of a world conquest. It was a pretty early world conquest, and some of our biggest limitations were converting the world. In this patch, subjects are terrible at converting, but you must convert provinces to be able to culture convert them. And of course, separatism. When you annex a province, it has separatism, and we were exploiting the fact that when you feed it to your subject and then integrate it through diplomacy, aka the HRE button, there is no separatism. So even for the last couple decades, I stopped annexing anything myself and fed it to the empire, so that there would be no separatism, because you cannot culturally convert with separatism. And yeah, we got a little bit of client state action. I released some client states in Roman colonies. They only had Roman provinces at some stage to actually try to avoid the too many territories, because our corruption was just going up and up and up. And I liked this cheeky little tactic here, guys. I actually, in order to reduce separatism, we hadn't cracked down on Mexico just yet. And I gave Europeans colonies, but we gave them enough fewer colonies to where they wouldn't own 5 provinces each and form a colonial nation. So we just gave one occupation to Normandy, one to Provence, one to Brittany, etc., France, Gascony, who were all members of the empire, so that they owned it directly, so that we hit the HRE button, and yeah, that was all separatism stuff. The end was history, boys. I was just converting it to my religion. We hit the button to unify everything, integrated my client states. We actually, I was egged on by my chat to do a one tag. I kept a client state here to divide North and South America, because this was an overseas region, primitive region, and we got 80% reduced culture conversion costs on South America. But that would not be the case if there was a direct land bridge to my capital city. That's what purpose this client state is serving. But we overkilled it in terms of Diplo points. The only other concern I had apart from religion was actually colonizing the whole world, because although we did have the only 100% culture among existing nations, I did want to eliminate every little inkling, including uncolonized land, from the game. And we overkilled it. I was absolutely killing it in every regard. So there we go. Oops. Why I didn't... I guess that's what the end looks like anyway. So a little bit of a casual mode YouTube video here, guys. I hope that that helps you. I do want to say one other thing to anybody who actually attempts this yourself, and it's basically exploit dev. The other thing we were doing is exploiting development all over the world in the territories that I owned that weren't Roman culture already. Do you see what I'm saying? When you exploit the development, it reduces the cost. So we were just doing that periodically. It's got a 20-year cooldown when you remove the development of a province, that you can't do it again for like 20 years or whatever. But by shrinking the whole world, we reduced the cost. So there it is. It's my best personal thing ever. That was a rundown to anybody who wasn't able to watch the live streams or actually appreciates this content. For Austria, boys, for the Holy Roman Empire, we did it. I'm really proud of myself. It's the best, most difficult, and ambitious thing I've ever achieved in EU4, and perhaps ever. Feels bad, man. Nerd for life. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.